Okay, so today we're going to start with perfect squares. Well, perfect square trinomials. Okay, and that's a trinomial where if you have the a squared plus 2ab plus b squared equals a plus b squared. Gotta straighten up that plus sign a little bit. And if you have a squared minus 2ab plus b squared, that's equal to a minus b squared. And you can prove either one of them if you want to. Okay, so I'll prove this one. So if you have a minus b squared, that's just a minus b times a minus b. Then if you do the FOIL method, your first is a squared, your outer is a times negative b, or negative ab. Your inner is a times negative b, or negative ab. And your last is negative, and negative is positive. Combine your like terms. You have a squared minus 2ab plus b squared. So you know that this is equal to that one. And it's the same thing for the other one. Okay, now this we're going to apply it to factoring. So let's say, for example, if you wanted to factor x squared plus 10x plus 25. Now you can always do the two numbers that multiplied equal c and add together to equal b, but this is just to kind of point out how it will look. Okay, so the first thing you want to do is look at the first and the last term. Okay, so if you notice x squared plus 10x plus 25, both of those are perfect squares. Okay, and that's because x squared is just x squared, and 25 is 5 squared. Okay, so you always want to look at your first and last term. Okay. So remember, if you have, I'm just going to write out the formula here. A squared plus 2ab plus b squared. Remember, that's just a plus b squared. So this one, if we rewrote it, you could have x squared plus, and we're just going to leave that blank for now, plus 5 squared. Then remember, if that's our a and that's our b, oh, this actually should have been, the square should have been on the outside. So if that's your a and that's your b, then this middle term has to equal 2 times a times b for you to plug it into that form, or that formula rather. So that means 2, remember a is just x, and b is 5. 2 times 5 is 10, so you have 10x, which is true. It's equal to our middle term. So that means all we have to do is plug in our a plus b squared. Okay, so that a plus b squared just becomes x plus 5 squared. Okay, and that would actually be your factor. Like I said, of course, with this one, you wouldn't have to go through all of that. You can just do the two numbers that multiply and two numbers that add. But you do have some where this would help make it a little bit faster. All right, leave that up for a few seconds. I'm still writing. It looks like everyone's done writing. Let's say, for example, if you wanted to factor 4x squared plus 4x plus 1. Oh, sorry about that. I thought it was a little lower than it was. Okay. Now this one you could use the a times c method and then do all that and replace bx with the two values and then factor by grouping and do all those extra steps. But you don't have to. As long as you look at the first and the last term and see that those are squared. Okay, so first and last terms are perfect squares. That's just something you want to notice. Okay, so 4x squared, remember that's just 2x squared. And whenever you have a 1, that's always the easiest because 1 is just 1 squared. Okay, so if we decide to rewrite this one, 4x squared plus 4x plus 1, we can actually rewrite it as 2x squared plus, remember, kind of leave that middle one blank for a second, plus 1 squared. Where this is your a, and this is your b. Okay, so remember, we're going to use the formula because these are both plus. And we find a nice little place to put it. There we go. I'll put it over here. We have a squared plus 2ab plus b squared equals a plus b squared. Okay? So that means if this is our a and this is our b, this middle term has to be 2 times a times b for this to be a perfect square trinomial. Okay, so that means you have 2 times 2x times 1. So this middle term is 4x, which matches that. Okay, so since this middle term is 4x, we can just go ahead and plug this right into our perfect square. So instead of a plus b squared, that's going to equal 2x plus 1 squared. Which is a lot less work than doing the old a times b method. I mean, a times c method. Yep. All right, so any questions on that one? All right, I'll leave that up for a few seconds. All right, looks like everyone's done writing. Okay, what if we wanted to factor 64x squared minus 32x plus 4? Again, you could use the A times C method, but now you're going to have really big numbers to deal with, because 64 times 4, then you have to find two numbers that multiply to equal that, and two numbers that add together to equal negative 32. So now you have to do all the positive and negatives and add the factors together. You don't have to. If you did, you could, but you don't have to. It would just be a whole lot of work and burn a whole lot of brain power. Okay, so the first thing you want to do is look at your first and your last terms. So first and last terms are perfect squares. Okay, so we know that our 64x squared, 64 is just 8 times 8. So that's 8, and x squared is just x times x. So that's 8x squared. And 4 is just 2 times 2. So that's just 2 squared. Okay, so that means that this 64x squared minus 32x plus 4, you can actually rewrite that as 8x squared minus, and we're going to leave that one blank for a second, plus 2 squared. Okay, which means in this case our a would equal 8x and our b would equal 2. Okay, so since we have a minus sign here, we're actually going to use the formula a squared minus 2ab plus b squared equals a minus b squared. So that sign there lets us know which one we're going to use. If this would have been a plus, we'd use the a plus b squared. But since it's minus, we're going to use the a minus b squared. All right. So that means that middle term has to be 2 times a times b for this to be a perfect square. Okay, so we just plug it in and see if it works. So you have 2 times a, which is 8x, times b, which is 2. Okay, so you have 2 times 8, 16. 16 times 2 is 32. So we have our minus 32x, which matches up there. So that means your a minus b squared would just become 8x minus 2 squared. And you're all done. Straighten that up a little bit. All right. Any questions on that one? All right, leave that up for a second. Let's say, for example, you wanted to factor 49x squared minus 126x plus 81. And this is where the a times c method is just unrealistic, because your a times c is just a ridiculously huge number. All right, so I'll give you a second to start on this one. Again, you want to look at your first and your last term. All right, so for this one, again, you want to look at those first and last terms. 49x squared, 49 is just 7 times 7. So that's 7x squared. 81 is just 9 times 9. That's just 9 squared. Which means that your 49x squared minus 126x plus 81 will become 7x squared minus, leave that blank for now, plus 9 squared. Which means that your A is equal to 7x and your B is equal to 9. Which means this middle term has to be 2 times A times B, since we're using, let me draw that over here, A squared minus 2AB plus B squared equals A minus B squared. So that means this has to be 2 times A, which is 7x, times B, which is 9. So 9 times 7 is 63. 63 times 2 is 126. So that's 126x. So these two match up. So that means your A minus B squared would equal 7x minus 9 squared. All right. Any questions on that one? All right. Leave that up for a second. Now next, we're going to look at our difference of squares. And really, it's just like the name says, since difference just means subtraction. It's the two squared values separated by a minus sign. Okay, so if you have some a squared minus b squared, it's going to equal a plus b times a minus b. Okay. And really, if you get this and you FOIL it out, the two middle terms will cancel each other out, and you're left with the left-hand side. Okay, so for example, what if we wanted to factor x squared minus 9? Okay, so just like before, we're going to look at the first and last term, but there are only two terms. So our first and last term are only two terms. Where x squared, remember that's just x squared. We know that 9 is just 3 squared, since it's just 3 times 3. Okay, so that means our x squared minus 9 will become x squared minus 3 squared. Okay, well, we know that our a is equal to x, and our b is equal to 3. Because remember, you're just looking for two squared values separated by a minus sign. And since it falls into that, two squared values separated by a minus sign, you have a plus b equals a minus b, or times a minus b. So that means our a plus b times a minus b will become x plus 3 times x minus 3. Okay, and that's your factor. All right. Any questions on that one? All right. Yep, still writing. It looks like everyone's done. Okay, what if we wanted to factor 16y squared minus 9? Again, we just noticed that they're both perfect squares. Okay, so 16y squared, 16 is just 4 times 4, so this just becomes 4y squared. Okay, same thing with 9. 9 is just 3 squared. Okay, so that means our 16y squared minus 9 just becomes 4y, and that entire quantity squared, minus 3 squared. Where our a is 4y, and our b is equal to 3. Okay, so we have two squared values separated by a minus sign. Okay, so that means our, forgot to put the actual a squared minus b squared equals a plus b times a minus b, or a minus b and a plus b. The order isn't that important. So a plus b times a minus b will become 4y plus 3 and 4y minus 3. All right, any questions on that one? Okay. All right. Sometimes they'll try to trip you up a little bit by switching things around. The exact same method. So what if you try to factor 25 minus 4y squared? Okay. Absolutely nothing's changed. You still have two squared values on the other side of a minus sign. Okay, so we know 25, that's just 5 times 5. So it's 5 squared. Okay. Same thing with 4y squared. 4y squared is just 2y, and that quantity squared. Okay, so that means that our 25 minus 4y squared, bring that up a little bit, becomes 5 squared minus 2y squared. Okay. Where in this case, our a is equal to 5, and our b is equal to 2y. Okay. So using the exact same formula that's up here, we know that our a plus b times a minus b will become 5 minus 2y and 5 plus 2y, or the other way around. All right. Any questions on that one? All right. Okay. So even in cases where you have more than one variable, the steps are exactly the same. Okay, so what if we wanted to factor 36a squared minus 49b squared? Now, in some cases, if you have a's and b's already in the expression, if you want to replace them with x and y, you can. You'll get the same answer. So you can rewrite as 36x squared minus 49y squared, if you like, to avoid confusion. Because the formula already has a's and b's in it, so you don't want to have extra a's and b's bouncing around there. So you can always rewrite it if you want to. Okay, so we know that 36x squared, remember that's just